Too. Hi everybody. Be here. Sorry till I get it. They already know me from Cameron. Okay, we are live. Yes. Hi everybody. So, hi everybody. Oh wow.
Sorry,
I
let me
can't
take that
stand
off.
my
There you
voice.
go.
We're here today. Thanks for joining us at the rundown. We have a special guest today, Mike or Michael Seney, right?
Go with Mike.
Mike works this better. For me, because I always mess up everybody's names. But he is here today. He is a congressional candidate.
We're on Mike Seney, New York District 20, common sense candidate for Congress, as I keep
Nice.
saying. Common sense.
I like that.
It's in short supply.
Very short supply.
Yes.
I was just going to say, you'd be surprised how many people do not have common sense. Visit Florida. Love you, Florida. My family's in there, but I have jokes all the time. So he is here today to explain to us and answer our questions. We have some questions here, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to jot them down in the comments, which everybody can see and ask.
Yes, we will get to your comments for sure.
So
Sorry, there's a huge gap.
Yeah.
There
I
we go.
know, sorry.
I don't buy
Trying
it.
to figure it out. Well, no.
So many comments. We're
In
going to
that
save
case.
that for rundown after hours.
Look, the
I go
after
in
hours.
that case. So real quick, I'm Jessica, owner of Blessings Wellness, Plush, Hawkeye Home Care. Here's
I'm Josie. I'm the owner of Healing Whispers.
I'm Sheena, the owner of Sheena Master Motivation and also the author of The Mask Behind the Mask.
I'm Dee
we love Dee Dee. We missed you last time, babe. All right, so everybody, now where do we start?
I think it'd be a good idea for Mike to just kind of give us a little spiel of who he is and what he's running for. We can go from there.
I always look for that opportunity. So I am Mike Seney. I grew up in Rensselaer County. I've lived here my whole life, minus from the time I was 17 on, deploying in the Marine Corps and Army and Air Force. But I always like to start back with really the formative years of any person's life. People will argue that it's from more or less 14, 15 on. Those are the formative years when you start to become who you are. My formative years have been based on the War on Terror. I was in 10th grade when 9/11 happened. I vividly remember watching the planes hit, and so the trajectory of my life has always in some way been based on that. When that happened, I was angry like most people, but coming from a military family, the answer was always clear for me. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps Infantry, and I spent 3 tours but 4 years in the Marine Corps Infantry, and I loved that. I would never change anything about that. But even the time in the Marine Corps, I always had my father as an example, and he was New York Army National Guard. A lot of people don't understand what the difference is, but Marine Corps was active duty, and then the National Guard was New York Army National Guard, so like the 1 weekend a month. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I knew I wanted to go to college, so the National Guard made sense. I did that for some years. I loved it. I trained. I was in the infantry again, and then from there, I ended up getting sent overseas, but I did it through a private DoD contracting company, and I was very proud to do that. And ultimately finished my degree, and from my degree I commissioned in the Air National Guard. I have 2 kids, John and Grace. They are everything to me, and I met them with my wife April, which we were married very young, and like a lot of military families, we faced the hardship of deployed and separated, but she remains on my team, and she's one of my best friends. And actually it's something I would say, of all the things I have in this world, something to be envious of is the relationship I have with April and her husband and our entire team, as I call it. So from there, moving forward, I ended up working at Amtrak for a long time, and my father, my brother, they're railroad people. That's what my whole family still does right now. I met my wife Stephanie actually at probably one of the lowest points in my life. I mean, we've all been there where you're down on your luck. I was divorced and things were not great, but Stephanie saw through all of that, and she was the first one to really support me and say, look, I think you're better than all this. And from the time I met her, it wasn't a year later, every single objective goal I had, she had, we both met.
That's awesome.
And she became Air Force, she was a state trooper, I commissioned, I ended up getting hired by the Sheriff's Department, and for a long time it was really what I would describe as truly happy, like to my core, like nothing, everything was perfect. December 26th of 2018, a pain in her leg. Everyone said, nothing could be wrong with her. She looked like Gal Gadot. I'm talking Wonder Woman. That's her physique. That's what she was. We went to the gym together, everything. But ended up being a really rare form of cancer, and within 8 months, she succumbed to it. And I don't know how else to say that in any other way. I spent about a year living in hospital room to hospital room, and so I've really felt what that's like. You know, she died in D469 at Albany Med, something I'll never forget, and it's still on my mind every single day, and it's what I was just thinking about out in the hallway 5 minutes ago. But so that's coming from that background and the military and Amtrak and my entire family, which is mostly Democrats in the city of Rensselaer. City of Rensselaer is great, and I can talk about that anyway, but I've lived to this point and I've seen what's going on in our country, and after fighting for it for 3 different branches, one of the things that really disgusts me, and it's where I'm running for Congress, I don't know if we're probably going to ask that at some point, but is the lack of civility, right? So I think the foundation of our country and where we are and how we've gotten this far is based off mutual respect. You know, like growing up, nobody cared about politics like they do right now. Nobody fought about it. Nobody said, oh, I don't like you because you're this or that. I can go into the ruck right now and I can get along with everybody in there, and I always have. And we don't always agree on politics, but it's not like we hate each other, right? The media, unfortunately, I feel like has taught us that it's this person agrees with this, then they're this. If you are this, you're that. And I reject that narrative. I know when it comes right down to it, people in Troy, Albany, Schenectady, all District 20, we are more alike than we are different. I know I'm more alike than everybody in this room than I am different. And I know that for sure because I've been on 5 different continents. I've been all over the world. So as Americans, we are always more alike than we are different.
I agree with
So
you, 100%.
that's where I would go with who I am and where the basis. But please, what questions do you have for me?
No, I love your story. You're sorry for your loss.
Thanks.
My question, one question, let's see. Okay, so are you Democrat or Republican? Let's start there.
That's my favorite question. My first event, I had 130 people there, and I guess about a third of them were Democrats. I'm a moderate Republican. That's something that people don't understand, or they constantly ask me, say, what does that mean? Well, I think both sides have their faults. We have the alt-left, as people say, or the alt-right. And I think the vast majority of us are somewhere in the middle. You know, even the colors of my campaign, if you notice, they're kind of working towards a purple. I guess that's in a way a play on the fact that we're all the same, right? Like, we're a little bit red, we're a little bit blue. Just because I say I'm a Republican doesn't mean I'm the ugliest version of Republican. Or if I say I'm a Democrat, I don't look at someone and say, oh, you believe in this or that. I just say, who are you? What do you like, or what do you agree on? And I think that's something we need to get back to. I'm a moderate Republican. I have some stark difference between other Republicans, but at the same time, there are things I don't agree with that a lot of senior members of the Democratic Party are pushing on this area, including Paul Tonko, but I'll wait till you ask me a question about that before I tell you anything.
I heard of Paul Tonko. I think he's like an assemblyman, or I don't know. I think I'm horrible with politics.
You just made my point already.
Okay.
We're done. The interview's over. That's my point.
Case closed, guys.
State senator.
But feeding off of what you just said, I totally agree with you, because me growing up, I don't know, I don't think my mother taught me that, but I think I just was always under the impression where if you're Democrat, you're poor. If you're Republican, you're rich. You know what I'm saying? However, which way that was. That's why I always was like, just assumed I was Democrat. Not that I was like down, dirt poor, but I was always, lower middle class, or even lower than that. Child of the system. Hello. But growing up, I realized, like bits and pieces of just learning from the news or whatever, and picking up, doing a little bit of my own research on what is it to be a Democrat, what is it to be a Republican. I started noticing that I, like yourself, am somewhat in the middle, you know what I mean? So I'm not like full-blooded or whatever Democrat, or like you said, don't totally agree with all the Republican stuff, but I am me, and these are my beliefs, you know what I mean? And it just happens to be a little bit from here and a little bit over there, and maybe a little bit from left field, but that makes me me. But they should really, like, why does it have to be?
And that's the question that frustrates me. Why does it have to be Democrat or Republican? Because that stark line that's drawn in the sand between the two camps, and where it's led us as a country so far, was one of the things that the founding fathers did not want to happen.
Correct.
One of the biggest things the founding fathers did not want to happen. Speaking for me personally, I've looked at where do my values line most with Republicans or Democrats. And one of the things that you brought up is I'm in stark opposition of some of the values, and I know we'll talk about that when we get into our questions, that the Republican Party has. But I don't like being forced to choose between one or the other, especially in New York State that is a closed primary system.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate that we have to pick camps because that's not what the government was created to be. And I don't know that any of us will really have the answer of why it is that way.
I think I have one, right?
Okay.
And so first you
Go
said
for
the
it.
founding fathers. George Washington, one of his biggest fears was always a two-party system.
Absolutely.
Because there's 100 ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes, right? You could say 1,000 ways. We have 50 different states, but we have two options. And what we're constantly shown is in my assessment, some of the ugliest one side has to offer and the ugliest the other side. And so if you start the conversation right there, it's no wonder you're not going to get along, right? In no way, it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what business you have. If you and somebody else have to work together, and there's things you agree on, things you disagree on, you don't ever start off with, all right, what do we absolutely disagree on? Let's start there. You start on what you do agree on, because there is always something you can ultimately agree on, and then branch off. And that's like how I like to do it. As far as what I think has caused this, and I really believe it's one of the big issues I put on my website and everywhere else, is term limits, right? So the president can only be there for 8 years. The Speaker of the House can be there indefinitely.
Yeah,
She's
that's
third in
true.
line for the presidency. It doesn't matter if it's a she or he, but the third in line for the presidency is the Speaker of the House. Term limits are critical. Senator Ted Cruz has put these forward that he's saying term limits are, important for him. I think they're important for every level of government.
Absolutely.
Nobody should
Absolutely.
be there for 30 years. I don't care if you're a
Absolutely.
D or an R.
I
If you've been
wholeheartedly agree.
let's just be honest, stabbing each other in the back and just fighting each other for 30 years, and then look and say, why don't they trust each other?
Well,
And then question. That's my biggest thing. Term limits. No one should be there that
and
long.
the other
I
part to
agree
that
with
too is when you have someone who is a representative in Congress and they've been there for 30 years, those are generations of changes in society, societal changes that this individual may not have caught up with. In understanding how can I put this? Well, there's no way around it. Our country just evolves and changes over 5, 10, 20 years.
Sure.
So someone with older values of 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, who still has that voting power in Congress, they may not have caught up with the way that current society is.
Exactly.
Regardless of what the values are, whether we're talking about women's rights or birth rights or civil or social justice, these are issues that bubble up in the core of local and state governments and eventually federal. But when you have the same person there with the same values of generations ago, that tends to be a stumbling block in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel there should be term limits. Because there should be a fresh, insert of new blood. People who are coming from the front lines, the ground up, the people who, were like the George Washingtons, they were the average person who was then the voice in government.
I would agree with what you just said, and I would say, I don't know anyone's political affiliation. Even today, you can ask her. I said, she showed me questions. I said, flip it over. I don't really care. You can-
He's like, I don't want to look it up.
I don't care. I don't need to. My answers are not. They don't ever change. That's like the easiest thing about being me is I have the same answers for everybody. Sometimes, imagine they rub people the wrong way. Other times, they resonate, but it doesn't change. I don't have two different sheets of music that I play. But I think the one thing you just said about agreeing with term limits, no matter where you are, there is no political side that's going to be hurt from term limits. Term limits are something we all agree on. It's cut and dry. No one should be there that long. You shouldn't be banking on spending a year in Washington, D.C. I mean, the Founding Fathers expected us to go serve in Congress. Service meaning that you're putting something above yourself, and then go back to being a cop or a farmer or
Exactly.
whatever you did
Exactly.
before you went there. To think you're going to be there for 30 years, no. I think anyone that should go there are in Congress now, and I think a lot of the new Congressmen and women that are there now all agree on that. I think at some point we need to come together, and sure, the leadership there is never going to vote themselves out of a job, but I would be 100% supportive of, since this class, the class of, looking at it like that, the class of 2020, henceforward, no one can be there, and this is just my own personal assessment. I think 8 years, because the president can be there for 8 years, House of Representatives should be 8 years. If you're in a leadership position, it should extend an additional 4 years for a total of 12, never more than 12, lest you make it to Senate, and then that clock starts over. But that's the way I feel about that.
Okay. Well, I agree with you because you can't expect the world to change if you still have the same people sitting at the seat representing, but they're not ready for change or even want to admit that we need change.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean,
So,
one of the,
No disrespect to y'all in Congress, but some of y'all got to get up and go.
I know.
One of the big things that's coming up now is, recognizing marginalized genders. So people who are non-binary individuals.
I was just gonna say, y'all know I'm slow with it. What is that again?
I'm about to ask the same question.
Marginalized genders are individuals who they may have been quote unquote born to a certain gender, but they don't identify with that gender. So we may be talking about non-binary individuals, transgender individuals, gender non-conforming individuals, and
So many.
there
Love
are.
all of you, but what's
Because-
non-binary?
Non-binary is a person who does not identify with either male or female.
Okay.
And one of the biggest things now happening at the federal level, well, that's at least what I've been paying attention to. I haven't been paying as much attention to the state level. But at the federal level, there's a lot of controversy around extending employer protections, well, employee protections in the workplace for marginalized genders, gender nonconforming, non-binary individuals, and extending the same rights and protections that women and people of color have to those individuals as well. And that's one of the biggest examples that's coming up right now when you have a lot of congresspeople, irrespective of what party line they're at, but they've been serving in Congress as a career since, let's take a number, 1960, 1970, when thinking about marginalized genders was not a thing. You were either a male or a female, that's it. So now this conversation is coming up because people are speaking up to represent who they are and the fact that they also have the right to those protections in the workplace. And that's a huge change, and that's one of the reasons that I'm a proponent of those term limits, because those changes need those conversations.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, if you, like 20 years ago, people, of the gay community wasn't allowed to get married, you know what I'm saying, and all that
Precisely.
stuff. So, we're going to get there later, honey. Just shout out to all y'all, we love you. Okay. Do you want to ask a question, babe?
How do you feel about women's rights?
All right, women's rights. I think
Straight to the point, boom.
No
House full
chaser.
of women.
this is an easy one.
Is it really?
I think it is. There's really no reason. I wasn't brought up like that, and I guess, there's always nature and nurture being a big part of it is how you were raised. I wasn't raised like that. My mother is a powerhouse. She controls my house. And what was her job? Let's not even talk about it. It doesn't make a difference what her job was. The fact is, even today, she's someone I talk to. So she did whatever she wanted. I have a sister that's a flight medic in the Air Force, a captain. She was the first female in my family's entire history, and we like to say we've been around since the Revolutionary War. First person in my family to become an officer in the military was my little sister, youngest one.
Shout out to his mom and his sister.
It's
Shout out.
painful. She's probably the smartest one in the family. She knows it too. But anyway, so Jenny is the first one in the military to become an officer. At the same time, I have my sister that's a school teacher who chose to not do the military. She's the only one in my family and my siblings that didn't. And if you look at the dynamics of my family, I have a brother that's railroad, Amtrak, military. Me, military, all the way through, and whatever you guys want to call me when I leave this show tonight, right?
Friends.
So then I have my sister Jenny, who's Air Force, and she's a nurse. And so of us three siblings, we've done all these things. There is no one that's somehow better than anybody at my house. We don't look at it like that. I think my little sister's smarter. My sister Lisa has her benefits. She's just so sweet, and she does what she does. But there's not a difference there. My mom, I'll say, growing up, she worked her butt off. My dad was at Amtrak. He was Army National Guard. My mom was a waitress my entire life, and I've always viewed the world from that lens. My mom worked. She gave us everything she needed, but she certainly wasn't rich, and that never changed the way I looked at her. And even today, she's my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. And to say somehow that my sister, who's in the Air Force, is somehow better than her, absolutely not. My mom is an equal in every way, and they're peers. Because what are we really talking about? Are you happy or are you not? Right? So stay-at-home mom who's truly happy, be envious of that, because you could be a high-end lawyer, you could be anything you want as a female, but be envious of the person that's happy. And some women want to be a stay-at-home wife. I have no less respect for that woman as I do one like my wife that died, who was Air Force. She was a state trooper. Anyone that knew us as a couple would most likely laugh and say she was way smarter than you and more in control. And I've said that before, and I can't even deny it. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Well, feeding off of that question, one thing that is, I know lately, probably last year, like I said, I don't know too much about laws and all that, but that rubbed me the wrong way when it comes to women's rights is they were taking away, and correct me if I'm wrong because like I said I don't know too much, but something along the lines that they were making it illegal again to do abortions. Am I right with that?
So
Please, thank you.
there are a number of states who have really increased the restrictions around abortion and women's right to choose. One of them is, and it's not New York State, because New York State codified the prior abortion laws, but there are a lot of Midwest and Southern states, for instance, that have the heartbeat law, where the moment they hear a heartbeat within the fetal monitor, it's no longer legal to perform an abortion. Now, a heartbeat would be physiologically possible a lot earlier than the fetus would be feasibly able to survive on their own. You can hear a heartbeat within the first, I want to say, 4 weeks or less. I believe it's less than 4 weeks.
And that's crazy because a lot of people don't even know they're pregnant until after
Right,
4
exactly.
weeks.
So by the time you've learned that you're pregnant as, as a female or individual with a womb, and you seek to have an abortion, you're already out of that time frame. And whereas with New York State, they codified the previous abortion law, so I'm taking New York State out of it. But that is a great question about women's right to choose and that stance.
So how do you feel about that?
I knew this was going to come
Hot
up.
seat,
Listen, no, it's not a hot seat.
Like, babe.
You know what? I'm glad you brought it up because this is something that I usually bring up. If you didn't, I would, because this is something that means so much, as it should, right? Where do we stand on this issue? And we have so many different religions, so many different people. We're in the state of New York. How do you land on this issue? And I'll tell you, here's my thoughts on it. It has already been settled, and it was settled from the beginning, the moment we said we are a separation of church and state. Okay, I'm Catholic, I go to church, I do what I need to do, and my faith is private to myself, and I don't brag about it because I don't need to. I know where I land on most things. But at the same time, the way I would say to anybody on either side is this: no religion has the right to, encourage the government to enforce their ideology. Right? So no religion can say, whether it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, name any religion, you have no right to petition the government to enforce your religion.
Mm-hmm.
But I would equally say no individual has the right to petition the government for funds that violate their religion. And I'll give you this example. My grandma Muller by marriage, but she was a Grandma O'Malley, as Irish Catholic as it gets. At the end of her life, she was torn because this is an Irish Catholic woman that for her, abortion was something that could never happen. That was not okay for her. And in her mind, the moment we started using tax dollars for it, it became something where she said, I don't want to pay my tax anymore. Now, I don't think it's that simple as just saying, okay, no tax dollars per se, but here is exactly the solution I would offer for that, if you'll hear me out.
Go right ahead, honey.
All right, you have two different sides. You have the religious and the faith-based people in this country, and I think you can never dismiss them or people on the other side. My concept of abortion is this: if you poll the country nationally, 62% of this country says they agreed with abortion when it was 4 to 5 months. And that's a national average, 62%. New York State went to, I say month 10, but really towards the very, very end. I'd like to see it come back more towards the middle, but I have two other stipulations. And one of them is this: with abortion, I think like any major surgery, if you're gonna get heart surgery, if you're gonna get a lung transplant, if you're going to leave the hospital, remember that video you had to watch where you had to not shake your baby for, it's like 20 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
I had to do it. I don't know if anybody else did, but anyway, so there's a precedence already for certain videos that you have to watch to understand whatever treatment you're about to go through. I think for me, I'd feel comfortable saying, okay, this is a 23-year-old girl, she doesn't share my faith, she's just an American citizen, she's her own person. I would like her to watch a video, and the video is just meant like any other surgery to understand what you're about to do. I would say 5 minutes to say, this is what you're about to go through. And I don't mean that in any kind of religious undertone. I wouldn't care who produced it. Just a video that says, look, this is what you're about to do. And then a 5-minute video that says, this is how to give your baby up for adoption. And if at X age you decide, I watch these videos, I know what I'm about to do, I know what the option is, I still choose to do it, I don't believe any government has the right to stop that person. But on the other side of that, and I'll go right into what my opponent, one of the things she pushes forward. She would go forward and say, all right, I'm going to make abortion illegal. Did you hear me say make abortion illegal? Because I don't think you have the right to do that. I think we're in New York State, you have many different groups, and to ever say, you should make that illegal, I don't agree with that. I think faith-based people, and even people in my own faith, to get someone to want to follow my religion, that's been the basis of religion since the beginning. People have to want to. You can't force someone to follow your religion.
That is
And
so true.
that's not right. Everyone knows what it's like to have somebody knock on their door that's from a religion you're not really into, and kind of walk through your house and follow. You're all like, yeah, not really.
Me now, I'm not speaking English.
Look, we all have our ways of dealing with that. So, look, I have
Love
a
ya.
religion. I come from a family of faith, and as much as I, as a person, individual, disagree with abortion, I don't believe the government has the right to say to every person that they can't have an abortion. I just like to find a compromise, and I guess that's what I'm always going for. It's easy to say if you're way to the right, absolutely not no abortion, and on the left, we're going to do it all the way till the 10th month. But that's not what we're trying to do here. What I'm trying to do in the entire premise of my campaign is somewhere in the middle. So if at any point I'm making one side too happy, I'm wrong, because it means I'm this or I'm this. Some of the ideas I have kind of make, and we'll get to more of them, you'll hear, there's ideas that I have that make people on the left a little bit uncomfortable. There's ideas that I have that make people on the right uncomfortable. What I'm trying to do is a very difficult path, but it's never made me afraid to stop doing something or start doing something. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off. Before we move on to the next question, if that's okay, I just had one small, because I read the abortion law at length. New York State codified 5 months. Anything more than that would have to be a life-threatening situation for the mother. So
Yeah, I was worried. I was like,
Yeah.
10 months?
10 months,
like, what?
that's past the birthing time.
Damn it, you're full
Yeah,
blown
that's why I
baby.
say like that, but
Yeah, but it's 20 weeks. It's 20 weeks where it is still deemed legal. Anything after that would have to be life-threatening for the parent. And there are also legal ramifications for
Yeah.
malpractice, things of that sort.
See, my take real quick is on abortion is, believe it or not, when I was younger, I always said, oh my gosh, abortion, I would never do that, never ever, that's so wrong, how can you do that, you know what I mean? And partly because, well, my religion was all crazy, my mother had me doing a million things, love you too, Mom. But anyway, so I was taught that it was wrong, it was bad, you know what I mean? But then as I was growing up and I started, understanding why certain people do that and stuff like that, I'm like, okay. But also, on the other hand, I have friends that literally would just use abortion like every other month. And I'm like, what are you doing? So I feel like you, there has to be a happy medium where, no, you can't have sex recklessly and just choose to have an abortion every 3 months, or whatever. Or no, you can't go after 5 months, you know what I mean? After that, like it has to be, but still have your right, but just with some structure, you know what I'm saying? Like, here, like, okay, we're not going to allow you to use abortion as a birth control, when clearly there is birth controls out there that you can use that will prevent you from getting pregnant. And at the same time, we're not going to fully take your right away, but we are going to say like, hey, after so many months, or, even, maybe so many abortions, it's like, all right, you're on your third one, Becky, that's enough for you, like you're cut off, no more abortions for you. But it's got to be finer than that, you know what I'm saying?
And that's where a lot of it's a nuanced issue, and a lot of the statistics come in as well, because one of the things with contraceptives, a lot of them are very harmful to the system of a woman. There are a lot of women who can't take them because of the hormones. And so you talk about, okay, we'll go into the whole condom thing. That's
a whole nother
But
show.
one of the things I wanted to actually double back around is the funding issue, because I agree. I feel like more education on the funding of Planned Parenthood would be a really great thing, because Planned Parenthood also does a lot of private fundraising. So if the private fundraising goes to areas where the public funds are more in that turmoil, that would be a good compromise.
you just kind of I was going to go back to this. So this is one of the talking points I hear on the right, and or that becomes like the flagship of the abortion issue. Where do we stand on Planned Parenthood? Well, I'll tell you right now, I would have no desire, and I don't think that's any sort of plan to say, vote for me, I'm going to make Planned Parenthood illegal or shut it down. That's actually the worst idea you could possibly do. So we see Planned Parenthood, it helps people, whether you're country or in the city, it doesn't make a difference.
Helped me when I was first pregnant, 19-year-olds and pregnant, didn't know where the hell to go. They might go to Planned Parenthood, they can help you.
So that's where I disagree with people that are on the far right flank. They'll say things like, are you going to get rid of Planned Parenthood? Absolutely not. That doesn't help anybody. They're in the cities, they're kids from the country come into the city. You don't really have a Planned Parenthood out in the middle of nowhere, Rensselaer County, but you do have them in the city. So everybody uses this resource. Planned Parenthood, in my opinion, should be broken up more or less into 2 EIN numbers. One of them, like your taxable identification code. And the one that does all the women's services for free in the inner cities, the ones that helps people get birth control if they choose to, yeah, give them funding all day long. Everybody has a benefit from that. And if that's what somebody wants, then give it to them. But on the other side of that, the section that specifically does the actual act of abortion, I think that's where they should focus their voluntary and the funds that people donate, because in some way you're saying to that other person that's over here, I'll just use my grandmother for example, that you're taking tax dollars and paying for an abortion. It's not really fair to her religion either. And that doesn't matter where you come from or what religion you are, you're more or less stepping on them. My point is this, like I said right from the beginning, separation of church and state. You have no right to petition the government to enforce your religion. No religion has the right, to use the government to tell you what to do.
I totally agree with you on that one. Awesome. Now, do you have a question, babe?
Send it. What do you have next?
Bring
We
it
got
on
that right
down.
out of the way.
Let's
I mean,
go.
I was like, just start with that one. We're downhill.
Okay, how do you feel
Totally got
about
this.
police brutality, and what do you think can be done to fix it?
Great question. I'm a law enforcement officer. I've been for 5 years.
Thank you for
I
your
come
services.
from, well, thank you. I come from a family of police. I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm on the SWAT team. I've been part of the SWAT team and really proud to do that. So I have my assessment. So I'm just Mike Seney. I'm a deputy sheriff of Rensselaer County, and here's my 5-year assessment. I like to roll my military background in this, but I see that any creature is always more likely to strike. And we started talking about this a minute ago, when they're afraid. Well, in New York State, we have something that's called Article 35, and people don't know that. Article 35 is basically what a police officer can do when it comes time for use of force, when they can shoot, when they can protect themselves. And it would state basically that you can use, deadly force, which is the force a person uses with the purpose of causing death or serious bodily harm. Go through the whole definition. Shooting your gun. You can do that when you're afraid for your life or the life of someone else. Now, we see a major disparity between thoughts on both sides of this issue. And now, I've been a police officer. Here's the problem. Training. I really think it's training. And I think that what I see often is one side will villainize, okay, the cops are all evil, they're terrible. Well, I don't know one single police officer that wakes up every day, and I'm not saying every cop's perfect. They're not. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. But to say that they're all bad and they're just waking up and doing these things, I disagree with. But what I will say is this. Imagine two people, right? One kid is the nicest kid you ever met. He's never been in an altercation his whole life. He's never been in a fight. Let's just say he's been at his mom's house his whole life, and he scored really good on a test, and now he's a police officer. You have somebody else that becomes a police officer that's been a more rambunctious type, maybe been deployed 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and then just another kid that grew up around Troy and has lived a Troy life, and now he's a cop, right? We have 3 different people who you can really say have 3 distinct thresholds of what makes them afraid. Now take all 3 of these people and put them in front of the exact same scenario of a scary situation. A call for a stolen vehicle, looking for said subject, he fits the bill, she fits the bill, and all of a sudden he's out and he's running towards you with something in his hand. Who do you think is most likely to fire because they're afraid first? Of those 3. The kid that never been in trouble, has never had anything in his life.
The kid that never been in trouble.
It's that simple in my mind, and it's not an insult. This kid could be a great kid, but his threshold of what's going to make him or her more afraid is probably a little bit easier than somebody that's grown up around here or somebody that's been deployed 5 times. So we can all point that out, and I think nobody disagrees with that. And no matter who you're talking to, we realize, look, there's different thresholds. But unfortunately for this poor person on the other side of this, they're going to get that result regardless of who shows up. And it's the luck of the draw who shows up, isn't it? I've had scenarios in my own police career where there were people that came at me with things that were somebody else might have taken it to the next level. I wasn't afraid to just grab them and toss them, right? But if I was somebody else, maybe I wouldn't have been. So what to do about that? Training, right? I think training is everything. And I don't just say training, let's move on to the next subject. I mean, more specifically, in the New York State Police Academy, Zone 5, it's a great academy. I went through Zone 5. I have nothing but good things to say. New York State is some of the longest police academies in the country. But if 5.5 months, you're only going through shoot, no shoot scenarios for the last couple weeks. So 5.5 months. So 5 months you're doing a lot of PowerPoints, we go through penal law, we go through all these things that are important. They need to be discussed. But to me, at that 5-yard line of what's really important, those shoot, no shoot scenarios, those scenarios where you're spun around, all of a sudden it's like, turn the lights on, you know, someone's running at you with a bottle or a phone or this or that. You go through the scenario, and what you choose to do, you're graded on, but let's just say you failed a bunch of times. Well, someone's probably going to give you a little talking to and then say, work on it when you get to where you're going. I don't think that's good enough.
No.
What I'm saying is that DHS is already a organization, Department of Homeland Security, that's in place in all 50 states. What I would like to see is for them to be able to add an additional 10 days of training that go through specifically those most stressful aspects of the police world, so that you can see, are you going to pass or you're not going to pass? And if you don't pass, don't care who you are, where you came from, you can't be there.
Mm-hmm.
If you are that frightened all the time, you shouldn't be a police officer, right? And that's one of my thoughts on that. And I'll point out one other aspect of this, and this is something that people also don't know, and I like to bring it up. I've been in the military for 14 years. If you look at the price at one point for what it costs to take somebody from the Army National Guard, like your weekend, 1 weekend a month troops, and send them to a large installation in Iraq, and say, okay, you're gonna, it doesn't matter what your job is, whether it's infantry, changing tires, there's so many different jobs, they're all important, but by no fault of this person's own, they've, just the training pipeline they've been through, anywhere from $20,000 to $120,000, then get them overseas, that cost for 1 year is about $1 million. If you take the war in Iraq and actually break it down per the troops that are on the ground and average it, it's about $1 million a troop. So we'll send a kid that's 19 and pretty much $1 million price tag, send him to Baghdad. But then your police here, myself included, my academy costs $5,300. Now my department does everything it can to train me beyond that, but we're talking about a very large gap in the training budgets. So then I asked why? Why are we training police this often? You know, every cop, if you ask them, would you like more money for training? They will say, absolutely yes. I don't care what, any cop in District 20, I'm friends with all of them, we want training. We want more time on the range, we want more time in hand-to-hand tactics, or just more or less imagine fighting, right? So it's not zero gun, because that's what the public sees, 0, 0, 0 gun all the time. I support any police officer, and I listen to the whole story before I go anything forward. I want to know what happened, but I think whether you're on the team police or team anti-police, which we see in a lot of different avenues in this country right now, we have to have police. If we don't police, this whole thing just falls apart.
Exactly.
And I want to see them trained more. I want additional funding to train the police.
Yep.
So that's,
I totally agree with you as far as the training, because, you know, especially I feel like we, you know, wanted to address this because it means a lot to us, you know, being minorities, because that's unfortunately what we see in the news all the time is police officer, whatever color, and you see a poor, you know, black kid, Spanish kid, or, you know, guy, or even females, you know what I mean, have been killed, you know, and, you know, this means a lot to us because it affects our community. So definitely training can help. I feel that the trust between police officers and our community has definitely went down because of everything that's been going on. So having the police officer come and just kind of rebuild that trust with their community, like, hey, like, dude, I'm not here to shoot you. Like, last thing I want to do is pull my gun out. But please know, like, tell everybody, your family. I have to tell my son, I'm gonna get emotional, but like when you go out, and he's 15 years old, like, whatever you do, just put your freaking hands up and get down on the floor. I don't care. Don't talk back. Don't say nothing. Put your hands up. Just lay down on the floor and just stay there, you know? But it's sad because he might not do that in that thing. You know what I mean? He might react something, you know. My daughter's more of the mouthy one. She probably, you know, get in his face. Kiki, you know you are. But even with her too, like, you know, you calm down, Key. Like, you know, you have to, because if they sense any kind of aggression, any kind of whatever, you don't know. And say you're in a crowd with kids, you know what I mean? You don't know how they're going to react because they have to think about their safety too, plus everybody else's safety. So if they see somebody fidgeting around and they're going to think it's a gun, here comes their gun, and who knows who else is in the crowd with other guns, you know what I mean? Like, you have to really sit and think before you react, you know, and that goes on both sides, you know, the people, you know, the victims and the police officers. And that's why it's so important to stress, like, I don't feel personally like there's, you know, all cops are bad, you know what I'm saying? Because everybody knows that I call police immediately. Kiki like, why you coming? Yep, because they shooting down the block and they ain't coming over here. I will call 911 ASAP. Come around my way. No F's given. I'm trying to keep it quiet, but y'all know what I mean. So I applaud you and I thank you so much for your services. And shout out to all you police out there. Keep doing your work, and thank you for moving next to me, because now it makes me feel a lot safer.
I'll just say, I thank you for bringing that up, and that's, we're hitting the hardest subjects. You realize that the country as a whole can't even talk about these things without wanting to rip each other in half.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that we're doing this because I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, but I think this is a great subject to broach, and to say that I have the perfect solution, no, nobody does. If somebody had a perfect solution for this, they'd be somewhere else, probably not me right now, right? They'd be doing something else. The solution for this can be found within the community, within each other. We have to come to that point.
We do.
We want police officers from in that area to be police officers in that
Yes.
area.
I was going to
It's
broach on that. I'm glad you did.
It's such a challenge, and I'll give you an example, right, real quick. And I know we have so many things to talk about, but a lot of the villainization we've seen with police, right? What kid right now, from here or there or anywhere, they're say 18 years old, they just went to Hudson Valley to get their criminal justice degree, and they're like, yeah, I'm almost old enough. Let me go to UAlbany. Now I have a bachelor's degree. I owe $60,000 in student loans. I'm going to take all these tests and do a job that it's seemingly everybody hates you. You're not going to do anything right. You're on camera 24/7.
And you don't even get paid enough.
You don't get paid that much money.
Seriously.
You're doing it for service. So I think, and this is what's tricky about it, is that there is no human life that's worth any more than any other. And so anytime there's a shooting that's questionable or something that goes bad, we all feel that. That's somebody's kid. I have my own kids, and I can only express with my eyeballs how I would feel if it was my kid. And so I don't claim to think, okay, I have a perfect solution for anybody that's been damaged in that way. That's the saddest thing in the world, right? And it builds that divide that we're all just so sad and sickened by. But to just say, all right, my plan is to just talk, terrible things about the police, or I'm going to do this or that.
That's
not a
work.
solution.
It does not help
The
at
solution I'm presenting is one that I honestly believe will improve relations, because I don't care how good the relations are. One bad shooting, that town is ripped up for 10 plus years minimum. No one's kid is worth any less. So if I can come up with a solution and create funding to come back and say, all right, the PD here in District 20 has that extra training where they're not so afraid, where they have that 1 second more where they're like, you know what, I can handle this person who's drunk and out of their mind. Because we deal with ugly stuff on the road. But I'm circling back around. The point I'm trying to make is that we have to work together, one, and my plan is to actually bring additional training and resources through DHS so that all these local PDs can go through some of those really stressful scenarios more than just 5 days at the end of the academy.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with you. Training, and get out in the community and mend those relationships, even if you are not the cause of it. But that trust needs to be rebuilt. So I want to just bring it back, because I know we kind of like jumped down all the way down real quick, but just kind of bringing it back real quick. So what motivated you to run, and why Congress?
Congress, because I want, first, Congressman Paul Tonko, and I'm going to go out swinging at him, and here's a few reasons why. But he's been in charge of District 20 for over 12 years, and seemingly I can't find a person that's told me a single thing that he's done.
I thought it was the second one, sorry.
Do you know what I'm saying? And so here's the thing, Paul is not effectively running the money for this area. And so Paul Tonko, take District 20, he's your rep that's deciding what federal funding comes to this area. So in New York State, about every dollar we send to the federal government, we're only bringing back 60 cents. Whose job it is to represent us in that money is Paul Tonko. We're not getting it back. The reason I want to run is because, frankly, there's some bigger issues, and then there's one emotional one I'll tell you at the end. But one of the things is just infrastructure, right? Albany, Schenectady, Troy, Rensselaer, all these cities that are in District 20, Amsterdam, they're old cities. We all agree on that, right? Like, look at these buildings. We have a beautiful, historic area in District 20. But something as simple as the plumbing, it's problematic. Some of the plumbing here in Troy is made out of wood. Some of it's, made out of clay. We have so many different materials and old galvanized steel. Well, everybody, no matter where you are, where you come from, we all like to do things like turn the sink on and flush the toilet, right? I always say at the core of all disagreements, there's always things we can disagree or we can agree on. One of them is flushing the toilet, right?
Absolutely.
You need
I
water
would
to
hope
do that.
so.
And so every single time everyone complains, we say these local politicians are doing everything they can to keep paving the roads. But then a week later, what do we have in Troy? Boom, burst, and it's ripped back up. And it just seems like such a waste of resources. Well, Paul Tonko is the one that should be fighting for us to get us infrastructure here. And by infrastructure, I mean literally fixing the plumbing in our cities. These cities have made it to this far, or this point, with plumbing that's completely outdated and shot. And the way it's written is, say, a section blows right here. They'll go in and they'll maybe replace 20 foot and put PVC. But after that PVC, it's coupling. There's a rubber connector that'll go back to wood plumbing, and then, galvanized. So all these different plumbings, and it's just Band-Aids all the way through.
So they just copy it.
Well, they only have the money to. So you can't even ask, look at the city of Troy. They're doing what they can with the resources they have, but they're finite resources. And so they barely, are just trying to keep plumbing going. So they fix this section, they fill it in, and then even though we just paved this a month ago, they patch it. So all of our brand new roads are shot. Here's the God's honest truth. Nobody wants to talk about it. All these cities I just mentioned in District 20 need major updating in the plumbing. Man, that's not a fun issue to talk about. Right? Like, what kind of politician goes out there and says, "Oh, I can build you an amphitheater. I can build you this and that." I'm talking about making it so you can flush your toilet.
Exactly. So we can have clean water.
Clean water.
Like, that's gonna work.
And continue to get water and services. Because if you think people want things or they need things, people want a lot of things. But you know what they need? They need clean drinking
That
water.
is so
and
true.
Paul Tonko needs to be fighting. The city of Troy itself at one point requested almost $900,000. They're pushing for this money for the city of Troy to start fixing these plumbing issues. We have even more residents here. You notice all these buildings going up?
Oh yeah.
That's more strain.
yeah.
Every time you have to add more buildings, that's more pressure you add to those pipes to provide those buildings with water. Well, when you add pressure to pipes that are 150 years old, they burst. So this is where we're at. We need major federal funding to get plumbing. Now, there's other issues we could talk about, but I'll tell you right now, I am friends with a lot of Democrats because I don't villainize Democrats. I have support from Democrats because half my family's Democrats. I was raised by Democrats. I don't care what you are. I care about what you're doing and who you are. If Paul Tonko was doing a good job, I would love to just go back to my old life where things are so easy. But he's not doing a good job. He's not doing what he needs to do for this area. So to him, I would say to anyone that we need to get back to infrastructure. I mean, I've talked to a great example, and I can't help but talk about him, Mike Stammel. This is a guy who has been working for Rensselaer County for many, many years over. He's constantly working with this area. Mike Stammel is a Republican, and the city of Rensselaer is vastly Democratic. Well, Mike Stammel was the one that said when they built all those dumps behind the school, where the school kids are saying we can't open the window because we can smell hot trash. How did that get approved? We don't know, right? But the leadership then at the time, it doesn't matter what they ran as. They were one thing, Mike Stammel was the other. Mike Stammel said, look, we need to fix this. The city of Rensselaer turned around and voted for Mike Stammel. Mike Stammel is technically a Republican, but rather than everyone say, well, I can't vote for him, he's a Republican, they said, all right, the people that are in charge now, forget what their dear are. Let's just call him Tom. Tom's not doing his job, and Mike's saying he's got a different idea. Mike got elected in the city of Rensselaer.
There you go.
That's a huge thing, and he serves as an example to anyone. It doesn't matter what party you are. People at the end of the day are not necessarily just looking at DRR. The extremes are, but the people that I'm looking to speak to, they're looking to vote for me, not my party.
Exactly.
And if they believe in me, then that's what they're going to vote, and that's what I'm trying to go for.
I'm loving everything we talked about. So. All right. Do you have a question, babe?
Sure. Let's see. Here's one. What do you think about the most recent bail reform?
Great question. All right.
And we hit him again now.
Ready, go. All right, bail reform. I'll try to be brief. She's giving me the look over there. That means I'm talking too much. I know that look. She's
You're
not making
fine.
a scowl though, so improvement from last time. Bail reform. You know what? I think this is one of those things that need to come together with a DNR, Democrats and Republicans. They need to come together with some unity. Now, I'll tell you my personal opinions, and then I'm going to go a step higher. So, in general, one of the things that me and everyone that I'm friends with all agree on is that there was a lot of resources that are being wasted. So I think as a politician, one of your main jobs is to protect tax dollars, because we all share them. That's like our community pool of money. You have to protect them. With bail reform, there was such flaws in it where we're taking petty crimes, say somebody that's, just a bullshit I first one. Let's see.
I'm not the bad guy today.
That's all right.
Shit. Okay, now you can feel better.
A low-end crime, right? And they're not violent. They didn't hurt anybody. And just because of the amount of little things they had, all of a sudden, the judge hits them with a $250 or a $500 bail. I've seen it 100 times over. This person has no friends left because he's just burned his family. Let's just make this guy up, but let's assume I've dealt with him 100 times over, him and her. All right. He doesn't have any friends left. Now he's going to go to RCJ. and on average about $200 a day total. Like after you add the entire cost of the facility and everything else, almost $200 a day, this individual is going to sit in jail for a $500 bail. Well, his court date and everything gets extended, so he's in jail for 8 weeks. Right? Take the morals out of it, even though it's hard to do, right? We try to keep some morals in our government, but take morals out of it. If you were just the banker on the top of this, you would say $200 a day, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, all the way going out 8 weeks. We didn't win on that. For what? For a $500 bail? And this guy, is nonviolent. So there's so many scenarios you could go through and say, get them out of jail. Nobody's benefiting from that. I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to pay for that guy or girl. They need to get out of jail. They're not doing anything. So there's that. But what happened was we saw more or less the party that's in charge right now, they added a bunch of other things, and really to go through every letter of the penal law and say, okay, this crime, yes, this crime, no, this crime, yes, that would be complicated. It would take a lot of time, it would take a lot of energy. It needs to happen, because what we did is push through a law that said if you're at this level of crime and below, draw a line, everything's no bail. Well, we're seeing those stories out there, and there are some of them that are tragically terrible. And I would say that what we need to do is flat out scrap this bail reform until we can come together, and it's someone that can come together. And this is public knowledge, so I'm going to put it out here. Mary Pat Donnelly is a prominent Democrat. I have maximum respect for her. She has come out a few times and put out there that she wants to work on it as well. So there's a lot of people that are willing to talk about updating it and fixing it. She's one of them. And I think you're seeing a lot of people that are coming out and saying the very same thing. So I think at this point, we need to look to how we can fix this. And there's two sides to this, right? So one of them is all the things I just talked about. The other side is that, like any legislation, it has to be funded. Let me give you an example. Right now, where we just changed things, you'd have to burn almost 3 times as many copies of every single bit of the arrest paperwork. Well, sometimes an arrest packet can be 40-something pages. So if we have to burn those additional 2 or 3 more copies, or burn 2 or 3 more discs, right now in ink, toner and paper, in 1 quarter this year, our agency is going to be out their 1-year budget mark already. So where do we find that money? So I'm not against doing bail reform. I'm against this bail reform because it didn't take the time to consider funding for these things. A little PD in Rensselaer County is not going to have the resource. They're literally going to run out of ink, toner, and paper and say, well, where are we going to get more?
Yeah.
Because they're not paying for it out of their own pocket. They need to have the government pay for it. And so, both sides can come up with ideas. And if one side's pushing an idea, I think there's merit to it. So then the other side needs to come together, and we need to come to something that makes sense. And this one, it was one of those things that's good initiative, but the judgment was bad and it needs to be repealed.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I feel like they had a good intent, but they just left themselves wide open for a bunch of messes. Like they need to, everybody needs to come together and, compromise on which ones are okay, which ones are not, and just get a little more structured with it, because
That's exactly how I feel.
it's like you said, tax dollars. Do I want to pay? I'm not saying you go in jail, but I'm going to use you. All right, Miss Thing over here forgot to pay a ticket, whatever. It's your license suspended, who knows? And she goes, $200. Let's just do it for a week, right? 7 days, $200 was $1,400. Out of my pocket, I gotta pay for your boo. It's not.
Right.
I ain't got that
full
extra
agreement
money
there.
for you. Let her go, and then she mixes the next one. Then just make it $200 to $500. You know what I'm saying? Or don't give her no bail for those little knick-knack paddywhack things. All right. So next question I have is, what are your views on the LGBTQ? I believe is it?
LGBTQ plus community.
I'm sorry, y'all probably hate me.
No.
Because I love y'all. I am so bad, but I love you guys all.
So I've spent several years just doing a lot of social justice research, a lot of community research, listening to a lot of people in the community. That's the reason why I know the terms, I know the statistics, because I've taken the time to just sit down and be educated. So I'm not correcting to say you're doing this wrong.
No.
Just,
I know. I just want y'all to do not get offended. Don't be killing me. Because I love y'all, okay? But I get confused. I forget.
I have to apologize for bowing out. It's not because I don't want to hear the answers to the questions.
It's my kids.
But we have a couple of smaller ones who
Bring
are
out
here.
the babies. We love them too.
I'm the closest one to the door, so that's why I have been bowing out. I'm sorry.
She going to handle that real quick and come right back.
Listen.
She giving them the side eye like, I don't shut the hell up right now. Okay, so go ahead, back to the question.
All
Mary.
right. So that question is,
What are your views on their community and their rights?
well, we all have the same rights. It's that simple. As far as where things land, people that are on my campaign are gay or part of that community, and I could not possibly care less. That makes no difference to me. The way I've always explained it to anybody I'm friends with who's maybe uncomfortable by it in any ways, I would say it's this simple. I like girls. I loved my wife. There's no scenario where if I woke up tomorrow and community and society said, Mike, but you're supposed to like guys. And I assume that's exactly what it is if you wake up and you're a gay male, for someone to wake up and society says you're supposed to like girls. You're never going to change my mind. So I don't assume you're ever going to change their mind. They are what they are. And so what someone's into is what they're into. That means nothing to me. You do what you want to do.
Exactly, whatever floats your boat, baby.
We got a lot of
That's how
problems
I
in this
feel.
world.
Whatever
If you
makes
want
you
a kiss
happy.
in the corner is not I
Hello.
can't care. Do what you got to do.
Okay, well, perfect. I love that answer. Okay, next question. How about immigration? What's your take on that? And
Immigration.
our issues that we're having in the states today.
All right, so this is a federal issue, and this is one of the things that is big on my campaign, and you can even see it on my website, securing our border, right, with everything in Iran. But I'll go back to what we see, and this is a problem I see with a lot of the Republican side of thing. And this is, I might get a look, but I'm going to be honest with you. This is what I think here. A lot of times, I see what's going on, and we see rallies and everything, and we constantly hear, build a wall, build a wall. Saying that, to me, what I think people anywhere else, and even what I can kind of feel, is it sounds awful lot like white people only, and that's not what people mean there. I know a lot of people in my family, they want to build a wall, but I know how it sounds. It sounds terrible. So I don't say that. In my campaign, we don't use that term anymore. Everyone knows it. You know what I want to build? I want to build a gate. Immigration is absolutely critical to this country's identity. It's critical to our economy. If you go out in the Southwest, we need immigration. Our country can't function without these immigrants that are coming across legally. So I don't see why there's any problem in having immigrants here. I want people to come here. I want them to come here legally, though, because there's no scenario where you can sustain any society where you can't control who's coming in and coming out. It's interesting because this is one of those issues that really kind of flipped who cared. I think if you went years past, you would have said, all right, well, Democrats were the ones that were the most firm on the border because Democrats used to, they were the party of the working union people. They said, we don't want this because it's going to take our jobs. And Republicans at the time, they were a little bit more lackadaisical, owning a lot of the farmland out there. Things have kind of changed. I don't care if you're a deer, I don't care who you are. This is not a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Things have kind of jumped up with Iran, these other countries. It's only going to go from here. We're going to deal with a lot of different countries. We have to be able to secure our border. If we have X amount of border crossings right now, I would suggest we could even double it. Our immigration problem is everyone's problem, and it's a major failure. Down the border, we need funding, we need money, we need to secure it, we need to, it wouldn't even bother me if we doubled it, but I wouldn't suggest I know the best answer. The guy that runs the border, the person that's in charge of the border patrol, DHS, they're going to have the most educated people in this, but I would take their suggestion, but also advise that we're going to increase the amount of entry points that we have on the southern border, but we need people to come through. We need to know who they are, whose kids those are. Are they your kids? Are they someone else's kids? Drug trafficking, and even as we start to get to a world where we're even more concerned with terrorism or conflicts with other countries that have foreign actors that are not going to fight us in a blue coat, red coat way, but sneaking people across, a giant open desert's not exactly in any of our interests. Okay, so my concept on this is none other than we have to secure the border, but we need to do it with equal parts of securing it with a physical gate, but at the same time also increasing the funding and the amount of people that are allowed to come in. And that's something that everybody agrees on. The amount of loopholes it takes to get in this country is obscene. I have, my ex-wife, her neighbors, everyone around there, they've legally immigrated, and they'll tell you they're the people that are most irritated by this because when their families have been waiting for years and years and years to get in here and they did everything right, and then it's just said if you run across the border, you're fine. I mean, how is that in any ways any mind as how's it going to work? I mean, if you were at Walmart right now and you're standing in line for an hour, any one of us, and somebody runs in front of you and they're allowed to just cut the line with no repercussions, and by the way, here's a free soda, but you don't do it,
Yeah.
you're just asking for more problems. And I think we need to come together. We need to secure it, build more gates, increase the amount of immigration we have legally.
I like that answer. Me? Huh?
Path to citizenship.
There you go. I like the answer. I don't like the whole wall thing, but I do like the way you said it's a gate. Because for me, it's like you can open a gate. You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly right.
You know,
It's
that's it's like we're not gonna, because when I think of the whole wall thing, I think of the Berlin Wall and how that came. You know what I mean? It's like you're trying to seclude us when America is not built on seclusion. You know what I'm saying?
And
America is built on immigration.
And part of the sensationalism also comes with the fact of where the wall is being built. It's being built at the southern border, not the northern border. And another part of the problem is with the immigration system as a whole, in my personal opinion, because there are only 3 paths to citizenship. The first, yes, I've done the research.
You like research. That's good.
I love research. I love knowing the issues and knowing the facts behind the issues. It's one of the reasons why I don't watch a lot of TV news. I do a lot of deep diving into not just the articles, but the actual government regulations, because that's where the facts are. And facts are what I'm about. So there are 3 paths to citizenship. The first one is you have to wait for the lottery. It's literally the lottery. Not every country. That's the other problem. There are certain countries that are allowed to participate in the lottery. There are other countries who have been historically barred, and a lot of those countries are in the region of Central America. So that's part of the problem. So when you put your name into the lottery, there, as you mentioned, years of wait time, and you have to be interviewed and this and that and the third and everything else before you actually have a chance to win the lottery. And that's just to be a long-term visa, in order to, at some point, if you've proven that you can sustain yourself for 5 years, then you can become a citizen. So that's option 1. The second option is you have to have a family member sponsor you. So for someone who maybe, they've not been lucky at the lottery, or they don't even qualify for the lottery, well, do you have a family member in the United States who can sponsor you to come over? That's where a lot of the marriages come in, and immediate family members, mother, daughter, or if an employer sponsors you for some form of long-term project because they cannot find any talent within the United States that fits the talent that you have. So you have to be sponsored. And last but not least was one we touched on just now, which was coming into the country, because that triggers the asylum possibility. But you have to be physically standing on American soil to request asylum. You can't request asylum from your country of origin. You have to touch American land. And those are the only 3 paths to actually come into the country legally. So in order to be able to extend that fairly, either more countries have to be part of the lottery, or we have to reevaluate the whole process, because those are the only 3 paths to American citizenship.
I would just jump on that and say one addition to that. Everything you're saying, yes, and we absolutely have to reevaluate everything we're doing at the border. Both sides have good ideas, but it's just like with bail reform, we need to come together, and these
Absolutely.
ideas, they do exist. This is America, we need immigrants, and none of us are sitting here, certainly not myself, saying we need to block people out. Absolutely not. We don't move forward as a country without legal immigration, but we want American citizens, we want citizens that are voting, and if we make it advantageous for people to not be a citizen, we can't then wonder why they're not citizens. We need to make it advantageous to be a citizen and encourage them to become citizens, and then we all
economically
benefit.
feasible to become a citizen as
Right.
well, because that, I can go into this all day long, but I researched that too.
That's another show, y'all.
I
Okay.
researched that process also.
Real quick, so what makes you different from past and present candidates?
All right. I would say what number 1 makes me different is something that I hope to change, and that's term limits, right? Because the person that's been there this long, I think he's lost touch. Now, and I'll say this, I don't think Paul Tonko started off the way he is now. I think years ago he was the kind of guy that represented this area, but he's been there so long, I don't think he remembers what it's like to be here and care about this area specifically. And when you're there in Congress for that long, I can only assume that the deals and the kind of I owe you a favor, I owe you a favor, you owe me a favor that's going on, where he's not providing for this area. Like I said, I'm the candidate that wants to keep water going in. What has he done? Nobody here can even name anything. I can't barely name anything he's done for this area, but I know what he hasn't done for this area. And what makes me different is that, you know, a candidate's supposed to reflect this area, right? So Paul Tonko is supposed to represent all of District 20. That means he's supposed to have like a feel and a pulse for what this community wants. He hasn't been here in that many years. How could he possibly? I've been in the Army, the Marines, the Air Force. I've worked construction. I flipped houses. I do all of that. People that really know me understand that I'm a great carpenter. I do what I do with my hands. I've worked at Amtrak. I've been in the unions. I grew up with a family that did well, but not great, not anything, just somewhere in the middle, so pretty average. And, you know, I know what it's like to have to try to figure out exactly the most efficient route to get to work because gas is that expensive. I've been down these roads. I didn't have what I have now. I worked really hard for what I have, but I certainly have never considered myself well off, right? I still know what that's like. Most of my family does not have much, and they are proud of what they have because they worked for it. And I come from that, and I want to bring that to Congress, whereas a lot of the other candidates, I feel like they forgot what it's been like to be here. You know, a difference with me is I have to get dressed up into my candidate clothes, right? You know what I am really? Put my work boots on, and that's where you're going to find me any other day of the week, right here in Troy. You've driven by me, and I'm out there, and I look like any other guy you see at Stewart's, because that's what I really am. I just am capable of more than that, and I'm going to keep going until I can get to the set of stairs and go into Congress and do
That's
something.
right, honey. Keep on going. You have any questions, Sheena?
What is it that you would like to accomplish if you win?
Specifically, I would like to work on immigration. If you look at my website, and she brought it up, and I'm glad because that is on the forefront of my mind. I think immigration is all of our problem, and there's only one solution. That's when we all come up with it. We have to get back to that. I want immigration squared away. The thought of all that stuff on the border, which we don't talk about anymore, right, because there's 9 other things ahead of it, it's still on my mind. It needs to be fixed. We cannot go forward as a country without fixing the border. We need to work on immigration. I would say in my first month, let's say I win, one of the things I would want is to call a meeting with everybody that's been in Congress for less than 8 years, because I'd really like to hear from them, right, because I'm pretty sure we could all come together on some ideas, because we don't owe each other anything. I want to secure the border. I want to get together with those that have been in Congress for less. And then me personally, for District 20, my goal, if I could stamp a couple years in Congress and come back here, and if people say, what did Mike Seney do? It's fix the plumbing. I know.
Giving us good water, y'all.
Yes,
we need water.
good,
I love
like
the
southern water, because you know I'm from South Carolina, so we used to have the well.
Well, I have a well, you know, so you fix the plumbing, and I would say the other thing, having my police background, if I could be the one to secure funding and get our police officers here more money than other police officers, because you have to look out for your own first, right? You can't critique someone else's yard till your yard's in order. Well, this is my yard that I want to work on. It's District 20. It's this area. It's these police. And I've been around enough to know we just need training. We need more money. And I'm positive the impact you're going to see is a reduced number of shootings that society finds gray or worse. Okay, so if those are my 2 landmark things, water and better trained police, and I would leave Congress and come back here and be a happy guy.
Be a happy man. I like it.
I like it.
You have a question, honey?
Dee, go ahead. What you
What has been your struggles in life?
Oh, jeez. No, I've been through some struggles, right? I'll leave the military out of it, but I deployed to Iraq in 2000, really my senior year of high school. So that's where I spent my senior year was in Baghdad. So if I seem off to you, it's just, but write it off as the war, the war on terror.
That's a lot right there.
So, you know, that's one of my struggles going forward, you know, and even where we're at now, you know, I think I come from a generation of the war on terror. Most people around my age, we associate with our entire adult life with something to do with Iraq or Iran, just the war on terror, Afghanistan. You know, these kids nowadays, they're in a whole different arena. This is the generation of these mass shootings, and there's just so much ugly going on. You know, and even myself, one of my struggles now is that I have a 7-year-old daughter. I have my daughter Grace. I have my son John Michael, and most of what I do is really the maximum I can to try to make their future better. We said yards, right? And it would be not accurate to say that I care about anyone's kid more than my own. I care about my own kids the most. I think we all can say that, right? But I care about all kids. I love kids, and that's our most precious resource. And so my struggle sitting here in this chair right now is that I'm running as a moderate Republican. I'm not afraid to talk to Democrats, but as I move forward, some of my ideas are not exactly the most popular to people on the hard right. But yet I'm not quite all the way to the left. I'm here in the middle, and I'm a moderate Republican. And so my struggles are finding ways to communicate with people so that I can enact these things that ultimately help my own family.
I love that. Okay, now for the people who would want to help you win and see you win, how can they help you achieve victory?
Two things.
Where can they go, to donate to your campaign and all that good stuff?
Yes, so if you go to www.seneyforcongress,
Let me put that in here.
I'll put that in mind.
please, seneyforcongress.com, that's my official website. If you ever look me up on Facebook, I'm friends with everybody, and I don't ever reject anyone based on their political ideology. I like to communicate with everybody, but you can see me on Facebook. I don't block anyone. I have everyone out there, and I'm always interested in that. So my Facebook, there's the Seney for Congress Facebook page. My personal ones where I do a lot of what I do from, but then also seneyforcongress.com. It goes over some of the ideas that I have. As it moves forward right now, ultimately I'll be in a primary. So right now you have Paul Tonko, and I believe there's another young man running for the Democratic nomination. I don't know much about him. I don't know his name, but there was something in the paper about him, and you know what? Good for him, right? Because everyone's benefited by having multiple choices for who's going to represent them. The challenge for District 20 is going to be for everyone to say, okay, am I going to vote purely based on partisan? I'm a D, I'm an R, and there's nothing more than that. Or are you going to pick which one of the four of us you want to go to represent all of us in Congress? So you have this young man on the Democratic side, you have Paul Tonko, who's of course been there for, in my assessment, about 15 years too long. You have myself, my favorite candidate, and then the other candidate that's running on the Republican ticket, and I don't have anything terrible to say about her. I think she's a very nice woman, a great family. I respect her and her background and everything she represents. I just think that she's far to my right, and I don't think she's going to necessarily be able to represent all of us here as well as I know I can.
Speaking as a woman and a minority woman, shout out to Puerto Rico. We love you. We are praying for you guys always. I personally, like I said, am neither Democrat or Republican, and I tend to go with a person. I listen to them and I hear their sincerity and their realness, because that's what resonates with me. And I feel like, thank you for coming here today, but I definitely feel you are being sincere and real, and everything that you are saying definitely resonates with us, you know what I mean? Because you're not so far right and you're not so far left, you know what I mean? And I feel like the vast majority of people that are unheard are in the middle, and that's the problem, with, I don't want to be Republican because I was taught Republicans are this, or I don't want to be Democrat because Democrat, we need someone for us that's going to be in the middle with us, that's going to have a little bit of here and a little bit of there and a little bit of out there too, and I really definitely commend you for being true to who you are and speaking your truth and not being afraid to say, I am a little bit, you know what I mean, of both. And that makes you rare, but that makes you definitely agreeable. What's the word? Relatable. That's the mother in me, my mom. Changing words. Oh, thank God. Oh, nope, it came back live. Thank you guys.
Well, please.
Well, one of the things in New York State I think is important to bring up is that, you mentioned primary. And as much as I also buck against being put into a bucket, one of the things that's important to communicate to voters is if you are interested in supporting Mike Sweeney is to make sure that you register in the according or in the respective party in order to be able to vote for Mike in the primary. Because New York State is still a closed primary state, you have to be in that party in order to vote for the primary, in order to then have your candidate be on the ballot for the general election.
And that sucks ass.
And the cutoff is February 14th, and you can go to the DMV website.
There you go.
And actually, if you look at my Facebook page, I posted up a link, and that link does allow anyone to, check your status so you can see if you're registered as a Democrat or Republican. And here's the thing people don't understand, and a lot of people don't understand, I like to explain it to them, is that just because you register as one thing or the other, in the general election, once it's down to what George Washington always feared, only a Democrat and a Republican, You can vote for whoever you want to.
Absolutely.
There's nothing locking you. But
Oh, okay.
I can
That's
tell
a great
you
point. Yes.
definitively, well, mostly definitively, that you're going to see Paul Tonko. He is the Democratic candidate. So as far as the primary goes, not so much. The choice is really going to be between, as a Republican candidate, there's Liz and there's myself. Only Republicans can vote on this issue and decide if they want me or Liz to be the one that goes against Paul Tonko. So if you were thinking about changing, go to my Facebook. You'll see that there is the link to the DMP website. Verify your status, and then if you're willing to support me, or even if you're a Democrat and you're not thinking about supporting me, but you at least would like to see me in the race, in the contest, to call out Paul and the things that I think he's missing and neglected in this area, you need to switch over to the Republican, at least for the primary, and vote me in there. Thank you.
And you can always switch back. Nothing is ever set in stone. It's just important for the purpose of the primaries. And as Michael mentioned, when it comes to a general election, you can vote for whomever you want.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. How you got to stick to one? That's what I was.
Yeah, you don't have to stick to one. At the same time, for New York State, when it comes to primaries, you have to be one or the other, because we do not have an open primary right now in New York State, which is one of the things I think should change.
Well, that sounds like it needs to change.
Yes.
So,
Your thing is off again.
come on, work of magic. Talk to me.
Talk to me.
So anyway, how else can people get a hold of you behind trying to connect? Come on, you guys. Is there?
Just got to connect first.
How else can they? That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
The other ones will go in.
Okay.
So you got your website. You got your Facebook. Do you have a location where, let's say, you're having or not quite yet, not yet. So
We're starting to get there.
That's fine.
We have our location that we work out of, which is really just my house, right? So,
Oh, nice.
you know what I'm not?
He doesn't want everybody coming
Don't show up there.
You know what I'm not a millionaire. I work for the sheriff's department. I do okay.
But that's what that's what people makes you relatable, because you're not a millionaire. So his struggle with this campaign has got to be so hard, because money always talks, but unfortunately money is not what the community wants. You know what I'm saying? And we have to show support. So
you brought that up, so I'm going to add on that. Yes, I don't have an infinite budget like everyone else. I'm running off a cop salary. I was at work today. I got out of work, went to grab something to eat quick, and here I am, right? So I still work a full-time job. I think that's another reason why I'm different than other candidates, because I have to do that. I also have 2 kids, so anyway, they're a young age. But the other aspect of this is money. I'm never going to beat Paul Tonko with money. It's never going to happen. And that's okay. I didn't come into this thinking, I'm going to beat Paul Tonko with his $900,000. But you know what money is not? It's not a vote. It leads to votes, and people will teach you that. But whether you give a candidate, $10,000 with you and your wife, or you give a candidate $10, it's just one vote and one vote. My plan on this is honestly based on a grassroots foundation out of my friends and family from the city of Rensselaer. I'm hoping the city of Troy, Albany, Schenectady, my police friends, people that have come across me on the airbase that are willing to give $20, because that's what I'm asking people for. My family doesn't have a lot of money, and I've never expected them to give the donation that the business owner would give. But if they give something to my campaign, I can show and put data down that says, look, hundreds of people are supporting me, which add to it, thousands of people are supporting me. That monies only may add up to X amount of dollars, a small portion of what Paul Tonko has, but I'm going to win this election by people voting for me as a person, not with money, and that's exactly how I want to win.
yeah, because a lot of us don't have money, you know what I mean? But don't think that just because you can't contribute money that you're not doing anything. You have to get out there and vote. You have to get out, share this video, so whoever didn't watch it can watch it and see what a great guy you are, and your morals and your beliefs, and what you plan on doing once you win.
Well, ladies, I can't thank you enough for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank
much.
you
for coming.
Appreciate it. Anybody got any questions?
awesome
We are all set. That was awesome.
Thank you so
You're
much.
great. You're right.
All right, guys.
Adios, amigos.
Adios.
Share. Love you guys. I'm all on this camera. Share.